cursed being hid within all the creatures that lived in the Greek people's dreams somewhere in Greece. Many brave heroes dared to seek this beast because it was undoubtedly one of the most feared, but none of them ever succeeded. They said that no one could confront this entity because it was so horrifying. Her name was Medusa, but she had a previous life as one of the most stunning people to ever walk the globe. She entered the earth as a typical infant because of the union of two primordial sea deities, Energies and Ceto, the two sisters of Medusa. They were Gorgons, creatures with characteristics of both women and serpents. Since she was a little girl, Medusa had a deep devotion to the goddess Athena, and when she played with her sisters, she would always pretend to be the goddess Athena, while they preferred to play the villains. She played with Medusa's best friend, a boy named Iphicles, along with the other girls. They couldn't be separated. Medusa developed and improved in beauty. The young morally were an easy target for Eros every day thanks to Medusa's allures. The god of love openly admitted his love for Medusa. The young woman had a strong affection for the guy, but was unable to give in to the temptation of love since she had dreams of becoming an Athena priestess. The young woman began preparing to become an Athena priestess when she reached the required age. Apprentices in the temple were expected to exhibit impeccable behavior and discipline. The goddess's reputation might be a reflection of all their deeds. Absolute purity was one of the main qualifications for being an Athena priestess. They were expected to reflect Athena in themselves. The young ladies should thus continue to be virgins, following the example of their goddess, who never yielded to the influence of Eros and Aphrodite. Medusa developed into a flawless priestess, possibly even too perfect, and her rituals continued to draw admirers who were charmed by the skillful execution of each of her actions by the stunning young woman. Beautiful hair that moved with Medusa's motions. Those who looked at her were entranced by it. It was said by a naive guy that Medusa's hair was more attractive than Athena's. From the highest peak of Mount Olympus, the goddess saw a disturbance in one of her temples. She understood that many people had come to view the charming priestess rather than worship her. Athena avoided the urge to retaliate in any way against people who turned their attention away from her and towards Medusa. The goddess understood that even though this was improper, the young priestess was not at fault because she was only carrying out her duties as best she could. Poseidon, who was in Mount Olympus, sensed the goddess's restlessness in the meanwhile. The capital of the Attica area, Athens, and the sea god engaged in a fierce battle over who should be the city's patron deity. The goddess succeeded in this argument, and the city's name was changed to Athens in her honor as her new protector deity. Poseidon struggled to accept defeat, so he waited for the ideal opportunity to get revenge on the goddess. The deity observed Athena's attention being drawn to her most lovely and graceful priestess. He made the decision that he could get retribution using this lovely young woman. Poseidon planned to damage Athena's reputation by harming her most steadfast supporter. While everything was going on, Medusa continued living her usual life without realizing that the Olympian gods were keeping an eye on her. Medusa strolled along the water while hiding amid the waves. She was followed by the sea god. Her name had been uttered by someone. The cry was heard across the water. Poseidon sprang from the water in all of his majesty. The god used his charm to entice the priestess of Athena, but Medusa, while being fascinated by all of his splendor, remembered her vows and turned down Poseidon. He seized Medusa's arm after refusing to accept the rejection. Unexpectedly reacting and striking him in the face, she was able to destroy the deity. Medusa fled to the Athena's temple, the only place she felt secure, but Poseidon, driven by desire, pursued the girl. Iphicles, a valiant man, stood between Poseidon and Medusa just as he was about to approach her. Despite his bravery, Iphicles was no match for the god. He sent the young man flying with a single stroke. Medusa entered the goddess's temple and bowed down in front of her statue. When she heard the god of the oceans walking towards the young lady who was being surrounded and called out for aid, she prayed for protection. Forcefully taking possession of her on the goddess altar, Poseidon then joyfully exited the temple, more successfully than expected, his retaliation. He not only damaged the cherished temple that the goddess truly prized for its cleanliness, but also the greatest priestess of Athena. When the goddess Athena assumed the shape of her statue and angrily accused the priestess, Medusa felt disgusted and ashamed. According to Athena, none of that would have occurred to her if it weren't for her flamboyant presence, which turned men away from the path of virtue and purity, and her pride, which made her alluring. Her reputation as a deity would not have suffered, and the temple would still have been immaculate. When night fell and the temple she was supposed to be caring for was dishonored, Athena made the decision to punish the priestess, who was now unclean and guilty. After receiving the severe blow, the priestess' ethical awareness returned. After suffering, he started looking for Medusa after hearing her sob at the Athena temple. When he got there, he saw Medusa sitting on the ground in complete darkness. He approached, giving words of relief, but as he stroked the young woman's shoulder, she urged him not to get too close since she didn't want to seem overly worried. The snake bit his hand. The two children exchanged glances as Medusa twisted in a menacing manner. In desperation, the young Iphicles turned into a statue made of stone. To prevent hurting anybody else, Medusa sobbed while hugging the statue of her dearest friend. She fled, but some city dwellers noticed her, and as they peered into her eyes, they got terrified. People exchanged stories about the dreadful snake-haired monster. To hunt the animal, a party was gathered. Days later, these people were discovered utterly horrified and looking terrified. Medusa only wanted to protect herself from unwarranted assault. She had no desire to harm anyone. She made the decision to hide in an area that had been deserted by its residents for many years. There, she discovered an ancient temple in ruins that she used as her hiding place. Numerous soldiers made an effort to kill the Gorgon for glory, but none ever came back, leaving Medusa alone and continuing to harm humanity and her reputation. As a terrifying creature who became legendary, Medusa lived by consuming rats and tiny animals. An unexpected reunion resulted from one of her victims, an old bust of the goddess Athena that Medusa came across. She understood that one of the first temples to provide the goddess with sanctuary had previously been among those ruins. Her old behaviors were resurrected by this finding. The dilettante daughter of Zeus, who was the greatest deity of Olympus despite leading a terrible life, Medusa began to take care of the temple and enhance the splendor of the goddess. The goddess did not overlook the honorable deeds of her former priestess, since the young woman continued to display her nobility in her heavenly home. Since no one could have seen those acts, she realized that vanity could not justify her behavior, and she felt bad for subjecting the girl to such a harsh and permanent punishment. Medusa heard the footsteps of another intruder while she was performing one of her numerous rituals. The fierce warrior moved cautiously, and the creatures hid as Medusa prepared the ambush. As she crept up on the warrior, she was astounded to see that he was carrying Athena's shield, the revered aegis that was once Zeus's. Medusa's bestiality had returned, and she was getting ready to face another foe. The youthful warrior separated Medusa's head from her body with a quick blow because Athena's shield was so polished that it reflected light like a mirror and helped him realize the monster was behind him. Despite being dead, Medusa's blood remained dripping to the ground. After finishing his work, Perseus returned Athena her aegis and handed her Medusa's head. From that moment on, he would be known in history as Perseus. Few were aware that Medusa bore Poseidon's divine seed, and that Chrysaor was created from her blood.